Hiya there. We're live. I'm Jules Brown, and you're listening and watching OTCR. That's Off the Cuff Review with me, Jules Brown. Now, I hope the picture's okay here. The last one I did was a bit rough. Anyway, to the review. I'm going to review, as I say, Seven and the Ragged Tiger by Duran Duran, which came out in December 1983. Now, I was a bit of a Duranny, and I have to admit, when this album came out, I was rather excited about it coming out. And I used to dial, as we did back in those days, what was it, 160 to listen to the latest releases. And I remember listening to I'm Looking for Cracks in the Pavement on my phone at the tender age of only 14. I was only 14. Now, if ever there was a band that polarized opinions, then that band was and is Duran Duran. This album obviously came out at the height of their fame, really. They'd just done Duran Duran and Rio. Those two albums were in the charts for over 100 weeks each, whereas this album was only in the charts for less than half that time, but it got to number one, whereas the two former Duran albums didn't. The album starts with the Reflex, which obviously ended up being a single. It wasn't the first single from this album, it was the third or fourth single from this album, I believe. And of course it was eventually remixed by Nile Rodgers of Chic, who added all the what, and made it more dynamic than this version. I should stress at this point that this album was produced by Alex Sadkin, Ian Little, and the band, being Duran Duran. It was originally being re-recorded by Ian Little, who had previously worked with Roxy Music, but he'd never done something on his own. So he's probably only working as an engineer. So this project got out of hand, and I think Ian was a bit worried, what with all the money that was behind the album. So they called in Alex Sadkin, who obviously had worked previously with Talking Heads and to a lesser extent the Thompson Twins, and Nick was obviously a big fan of Talking Heads, so that's, I think, why they got him on board. So after the Reflex, which I used to love this track, but today it sounds a bit on this album a bit weedy, and I can understand now why they felt the need for Nile to remix it, even though it then became that bit of a monster. Track number 2, New Moon on Monday. Jangly, another single. I think this was the second single off the album. Jangly guitar riff by Andy. Simon sings a high verse, a high chorus, and manages to try and harmonize even higher, which is quite a painful listen. Of course, Simon does tend to sing quite a high register. And as we know, a year or two down the line, when they did the Wild Boys, it was almost, it was unbearable for me as a listener. I'd buy the Wild Boys. Even a 15-year-old boy, I wasn't accepting any of that. But anyway, back to this album. New Moon on Monday is a nice enough track, but it's just the vocal, really. It's too high. Track number 3, I'm Looking for Cracks in the Pavement. I always like this one. Nice bass line by John. Nice, very Nick keyboards, typical of Nick, those keyboards in this track, and a guitar solo by Andy out of the blue. A bit of a rock solo, even though the guitar has been compressed, and they're obviously trying to rein him in a bit. Track number 4, I Take the Dice, probably one of the lesser known songs on the album. Trademark Nick Rhodes synth sound. Another Andy Taylor jangling guitar. Up until this point, Andy was hardly ever his guitar work on the first albums. Well, maybe on Lonely in Your Nightmare he jangles a bit, doesn't he? But yeah, he's jangling on this one, but it's so quiet. It's almost like it needn't be in there. So low in the mix. And we have in I Take the Dice these percussive effects, which are very much reminiscent of Talking Heads and Speaking Tongues album. So it's the Alex Sadkin connection there. So whether they're done by Raphael de Jesus or done by through a synthesizer, I don't know, but it very much, it has that sort of sound and deployed on this Duran album. Track number 5 of Crime and Passion, the last song on side 1. It's quite an exciting track, but very crowded, very high octane. The guitars, I think this is the first song that people would have heard Nick's usage of keyboard brass stabs, which are all over off Crime and Passion. You get the feeling that Andy's guitar should be louder in the mix, really. I know he's a rock guitarist, but on this track it's really quite low in the mix. And they on the guitars, and quite happens quite a lot on this album, Andy's guitars clash quite a lot with Nick's keys. And maybe it wouldn't be so much of a problem if Simon didn't sing in such a high register, because everything's up there, everything's way up there. They're all struggling to be heard, and it does become a bit of an issue on this album. And up until now, wasn't really a problem on Rio. And maybe it's Duran Duran trying to grow up before they really were grown up, if you like. First song on side 2 is their first single from this album, The Union of the Snake, with its definite Let's Dance references, the Bowie song, the fashionable choppy guitar style of Andy, and the brass stabs. Used to enjoy the monkey mix. Was it the monkey mix of this? The monkey mix of this. It was the monster mix of Is There Something I Should Know, wasn't it? With the ridiculously high, heavy, powerful snare drum. But enough of that. Back to this album. Union of the Snake. Yeah, the first single from this album with the ludicrous lizard video. Track 2 on side 2, Shadows on Your Side. I used to love this track. It's quite dynamic. Andy's got a jangly guitar going on the verse again. Catchy number. The keys are really loud in it. It's very cluttered towards the end of the song, particularly when Andy is playing chords and Rhodes has got about 25 keyboards going at the same time, and the drums throughout the old album. I think the drum sound is not very good. Their drums are just it's not as if it's got that 80s classic 80s big snare drum sound. It's just sound a bit weedy, compressed and weedy. Then Tiger Tiger, which is an instrumental track where the boys think they're being a bit arty, and John gets out his fretless bass. Nice work. There's saxophone on it. Andy Hamilton on saxophone. It's quite nice. Andy's again just playing quite tasteful chords. He's not wearing them though. I imagine he'd be wearing leather pants at the stage. It's got this shuffling sequencer sound at the beginning, like this. I'm sure they were very pleased with that. Well, Nick would have been very pleased with that at the time. And then we go to the last song on the album, The Seventh Stranger. which, you know, purists would probably say this is the best song on the album. It's them trying to be grown up. It is a bit more grown up. It's got this clunky bit of drums on the bridge by Roger. Some Ebo. It sounds like an Ebo guitar in the chorus by Andy. That sounds all right, actually. But again, there's these keys all around it. Very high in the mix. Compressed to hell. Everything sounds a bit crowded in this track as well. And I think John's got his fretless bass playing as well. The song isn't bad. And Le Bon's voice in this one is maybe a bit more bearable. But the ending, it ends with sort of like some percussion by either Raphael de Jesus or Mark Kennedy, which is like classic, you know, that percussion that those guys do, leading into this sort of synth keyboard line. Albums, maybe not this album, but maybe on the first two albums. I don't know if those rumors have been proven, but anyway, yeah, it's got a bit of a pan-pipey end to it, which I'm not sure Nick would have been going for. But there you go. That's Seven and the Ragged Tiger. One of those albums that is going to polarize views considerably. I stuck up for it at the time. I've stuck up for it over the years. Today, I'm going to go. I did enjoy it to a certain extent. Hard one to mark this because of nostalgia, but I'm going to give it. What should I give it? 6.5. I think so. I think 6.5 is fair, don't you? Anyway, thank you for listening. I'm Jules Brown. You're listening and watching Off the Cuff Reviews, OTCR. If you'd like to subscribe, please click the subscribe button. And if you want to comment, do so. It's been great of you to listen and watch. And I hope you can tune in for more reviews. I'll be doing all sorts of reviews across the board of music in my record and CD collection. So do tune in. I'm going to sign out now. So anyway, have a good evening. Hope to see you soon. Thank you.